Welcome, everyone. My name is Najima Davis Washington. I currently serve as the Associate Director for Alumni Engagement and Career Services. I'm also a proud member of the Staff Advisory Committee to the President and one of the co-founders of the Whipper Grant Learning Community here on campus. And I have the pleasure of producing our welcome this afternoon. It's been a great 250-year celebration, so sometimes I don't know. I'm sure we all enjoyed the parade, right? And the carnival, it seemed like, outside, was that Friday or Thursday? Again, I have the pleasure of welcoming you here to the college, to this new beautiful building, and to February 1st, the start of the Black History Month celebration at the college as we bring in this celebration of 250 years at the College of Charleston. Yes. I see a lot of friendly faces, staff, faculty, parents, alums, and the like. I would like to acknowledge some of our supporters and sponsors here today, specifically PNC Bank, who is a generous sponsor of this event. I want to thank them for their financial support through the College of Charleston Alumni Association. I'd also like to acknowledge any of the trustees that I see we have in the audience. If you would stand, I see, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attendance. And some of them will be a part of our program, but we do have various dignitaries. If we would have not only Mayor Riley, but current Mayor Tecklenburg, please stand. And is there anyone else here that... Thank you so much. I'd like to acknowledge the 250th Campus and Alumni Events Committees, both of those committees and the committee members that are here today, for which this program and the rest of the programs for the entire year-long celebration, you are just going to be amazed. Special thanks to Kimberly Gilliard, Adriana Gainey, Ron Menchaca, Darcy Goodwin, and Melantha Audrey. I won't waste my time with too many comments, but we're here to acknowledge and celebrate the judicial activism of Judge Julius Waties-Waring, the bravery of those who broke the color barrier, and the courage of those who were tapped to chart a new course. And here we are, 2020, February 1st, in a new building, on an old campus, on a beautiful campus with a beautiful history that we are to celebrate. And let's begin. Thank you so very much for your attendance.
Good afternoon. My name is Demetria Noizette Clemens, and I serve as Vice Chair of our Board of Trustees, and I'm an alum of the college, class of 1975. It is truly a pleasure to stand before you on such a special occasion, celebrating our history makers and trailblazers. This event is part of our 250th anniversary, as well as a kickoff to Black History Month. To celebrate on the first day of February and 2 days after our Earth Day celebration is momentous for our campus. At this defining moment in our history, our 250th anniversary for the college, many, if not all of us, are excited and ready for change. Many of us have been affiliated with the college in various capacities for over 50 years. We are looking for change we can believe in. Change you can believe in requires you to believe in President Chu's ability to bring change to the College of Charleston, and it requires you to believe in your ability to bring change. What makes a person a history maker or a trailblazer? A history maker or trailblazer is someone who is considered among the first in their area. They point the way, take risks, and change the environment. They have a vision for a different future, a faith that turns their dreams into reality, and a determination that cuts barriers and obstacles. Today is truly a historic day in so many different ways. For today, we acknowledge our past and the impact of access, equity, and inclusion. We lift praises to our present, and we rejoice in our future, for there is greatness that we have here at the College of Charleston. Our history makers and trailblazers are what I call warriors of the light. They have done the work, laid the foundation. Now we must follow. Who are the followers? We all are the followers. We must recognize the call to action. Before we can act, we must have inclusivity in our thought, our minds. We must have inclusivity in our intentions, our hearts. Then our actions will always show humility, pride, and a campus welcoming to all. As President Chu stated in his inauguration remarks last fall, this university represents transformation. Transformation of the individual lives of students educated here. Transformation of a city and region that serve as its beautiful home. And transformation of a world populated with and influenced by College of Charleston educated men and women. In order for us to continue moving forward, we must have those in the present leadership receive from those in our past. We must have keepers of the light. On this day, our warriors of the light will pass their torch to our keepers of the light, making a commitment to be true, pure, strong, and brave. At this time, I present to you our warriors of the light. Representing the legacy of President Stern, his daughter Elizabeth Edwards. Our second warrior of the light, the Honorable Lucille Woodward. Our third warrior of the light, former Mayor Joseph Roberts. Brian Hicks, author of In Darkness, South Carolina. Our fifth, Otto German, among the first two student athletes. Dr. Andrew Lewis, our sixth warrior of the light, the third African-American faculty member here at the top. Tony Meyer, Director of Student Relations in the 70s, is represented by Karen Jones. Tony Meyer. And representing Eddie Ganaway, we have his widow, Elizabeth. At this time, I present to you our keepers of the light. President Andrew Shue, continuing the work of President Ted Stern. Dr. Bernard Harris, continuing the work of Lucille Whipper. Mayor John Tecklenburg, continuing the work of Mayor Joe Riley. Dr. Sharissa Owens, writing the stories like Brian Hicks that we often ignore. Kenyatta Grimmage, continuing the work of Otto German. Dr. Courtney Howard, continuing the work ethics of Dr. Andrew Lewis. Dr. Alicia Cadill, continuing the work of Tony Myers of Serving Students. And Kim Gilliard, continuing the concept of service to others like Eddie Ganaway. At this time, our warriors of the light, turn to your keeper of the light. And state the following in unison. I hereby present to you this warrior of the light candle, signifying the light of my works. I charge you to continue the journey and a call to action for access, equity, and inclusion for all. At this time, the keepers of the light, please, I accept this warrior of the light candle, signifying my commitment to walk in the light. I will be true, for there are those who trust me. I will be pure, for there are those who care. I will be strong, for there is much to suffer. I will be brave, for there is much to dare. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our warriors of the light and our keepers of the light. Thank you. I wanted to light the candles, but I had a nightmare that we did that and the sprinkler system came on. Our first session is 1770 to 1954, laying the foundation for change, with Brian Hicks and moderated by Herb Frazier. Please come forward.
Okay, Brian. Good to see you again.
You too.
Yeah. You have to keep in mind, we worked at the newspaper together, so this is sort of like a nice reunion. So let's talk about your book, Antarctica, South Carolina. It is the story of how Julius Williams Waring, the son of a Confederate soldier, used his white privilege to rise from modest means to become part of the Charleston elite. He married a woman from a wealthy Charleston family. He got a job as a Broad Street lawyer, and later he won confirmation to the federal bench. After graduating from this college, he was very active in alumni affairs, and he even served 2 decades on the Board of Trustees. Yet, as a result of the decisions he made in his personal life and his rulings from the bench, he quickly lost favor among white Charlestonians. His judicial decisions caused him to become the target of death threats from those who opposed racial segregation. What were those rulings? Chief among them was his dissenting vote in the 1951 case known as Briggs versus Elliott, a school desegregation test case from Clarendon County. In his ruling, Waring wrote, "Segregation is per se inequality," a decision that formed the legal foundation for the U.S. Supreme Court's 1954 Brown versus Board of Education ruling that changed America. Waring had his sights set on challenging the separate but equal doctrine of the time, and he used his position to openly put his thumb on the scales of justice by recommending that Thurgood Marshall, the NAACP attorney for the plaintiffs in Briggs versus Elliott, challenge the constitutionality of segregation head-on. In our conversation a few days ago, Brian, you remember you said that this book is not entirely about Judge Waring and how he helped to change South Carolina and America, but it is also a tribute to those unsung heroes of the civil rights movement in Charleston who were friends of Waring and his second wife, Elizabeth. One of the reviews of your book speaks directly to that. Quote, "As a South Carolinian, this book gave me hope and also made me angry. The story of Judge Waring is intriguing and well worth the read. But what I truly gained from this read was Septima Clark, a South Carolina native and early civil rights activist. I don't recall ever being taught about Miss Clark in my public school, about my public South Carolina schooling. I look forward to learning more about her. The book also made me sad and angry because while reading it, it helped me realize how much progress we have made since the era of segregation. We have so much more to go. Read this to be encouraged and challenged without the heaviness of a textbook." So, Judge Waring was a student here. While he was here, he got involved in a literary group. He was a member of a fraternity. He left. He served on the Board of Trustees, and he was on the alumni. He was an officer in the Alumni Association. He also tried to change this college. It didn't work out. He tried to get the college to admit black students. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this was in the late 40s, probably 48, 49, 50, when his conversion to a full-fledged civil rights activist had sort of bloomed. And he had the bright idea that we should admit African-American students to the College of Charleston. And city officials, college officials says, whoa, we're not real sure about that. And instead, as it turns out, what they did instead was give scholarships to some black high school students to go to SC State. And it was an interesting turnaround for the judge. This was learned experience for Waring. He wasn't brought up that way, and in fact, one of the first things I learned about him after graduating college, which he did in 1900, he was within a couple of years on the Alumni Association, and he was among those members of the Alumni Association who voted against admitting female students.
That was quite a contradiction from he supported trying to get black students in, but he didn't think that women should go to the college. And I have to admit, I'd forgotten that this used to be an all-male school. I didn't remember that.
Well, 45 years had passed in the interim. A lot could change, as we know. And it was kind of funny, but he came back in 1945. He was here for graduation at Cistern. They were giving him an honorary law degree. And there were more female graduates than male graduates by that point.
Now, we'll get into this in a minute, but what was interesting that when the city gave these scholarships to the black students to go to SC State ultimately got a law school. Right? SC State dedicated that law school, but they didn't invite Judge Waring to the law school. And
he was very upset about that, given that he had sort of had a hand in that. What had happened was a man from Charleston had enrolled, tried to get into USC's law school, and they wouldn't let him.
Don Wright, I believe his name.
Yeah, that was him. And wanted to go to law school, and they wouldn't let him. And this was one of those cases where Waring didn't exactly follow along with what you would think of as a civil rights activist. He ruled against Wright. He said, well, it's in the Constitution. They can segregate if they want to. That's the law of the land. And he said, from the bench, he may have even written in his opinion, he said, I think it would make a lot more sense to buy him a desk and just let him sit there, but the state can do what they want to. And as a result of that, they set up a law school at SC State.
But he gave the state three choices: either admit Wrighton, or close the law school, or open up a law school at SC State in Orangeburg. They took the latter, and that's when they dedicated it, and they didn't invite him to the dedication.
He was quite hurt about that. Of course, they knew where this was going from the beginning. Within a month of Wright filing that lawsuit, the legislature started raising money for the SC State Law School. They knew what they were going to do.
Well, that was one of a few, I guess, very, very controversial decisions he made. Another decision he made that really upset white South Carolina was equal pay for teachers regardless of race, and opening the all-white Democratic primary to black voters, black candidates.
Yeah, the teacher pay case was his first true civil rights ruling, and the first time he met Thurgood Marshall, who was representing the Burke High teacher who had petitioned for equal pay. That was interesting. I don't have time to tell the whole story, but he came into court, and everybody in Charleston had showed up. The teachers, black and white, showed up to see what was going to happen with this ruling. At the time, white teachers at the white schools in Charleston, black teachers at the black schools were making 60% of what white teachers made, which I point out is not coincidentally 3/5. But in the trial, this is the first time Waring had ever met Thurgood Marshall, and their friendship became the basis for Brown versus Ford. And they come into the courtroom, and the first thing Waring does is ask the school attorneys, when was the Alston case decided out of Virginia Beach? And the lawyer didn't know, and he's fumbling through his papers. Thurgood Marshall stands up and says, Your Honor, And Waring looks at him and says, "Sit down, Mr. Marshall." There's a murmur through the courtroom, they're not even gonna let him talk. And the school attorney finally found the case and said, "Oh, that was 1937. And he goes, "Well, how about the Maryland case?" And again, he started flipping through his papers because he didn't know. And Thurgood Marshall stood up and says, "Your Honor." And Waring looked at him very pointedly and said, "Sit down, Mr. Marshall." And somebody, you could hear somebody in the audience say, "They're not even gonna let her attorney talk." Well, the school attorney finally found the date on the Maryland case, which I can't remember either. But as soon as he got it, Judge Waring turned around and said, "Mr. Marshall, I'm sorry if you thought I was being rude to you, but I knew that you knew the answers to those questions because those were your lawsuits." He said, "The only question I have for you is, do you want to equalize teacher pay today, or do you want to give them a few months to raise some money?" And Thurgood Marshall later said it was the only case he ever tried with his jaw hanging open. And that started this beautiful friendship.
It was a very beautiful friendship, and it was also, one might argue, a collaboration, a legal collaboration, because the judge really openly told him what he needed to do in the Briggs case. He said, dismiss that first case and rewrite it as a school desegregation case to put that clearly in the lap of the Supreme Court, which he knew was going to bring it up. And we, as looking back in history, they did just that.
Yeah. The Briggs versus Elliott case, which in 1951 challenged the constitutionality of segregation in segregated schools, started out as a simple bus lawsuit. And after this teacher case in 44, 45, Marshall was in Charleston a fair amount. And he was often seen at the courthouse, hanging out in the judge's chambers. And they got to be buddies. So when this bus lawsuit comes up, and Waring dismissed it out of hand, everybody said, "I thought they were buddies. What's he doing throwing his lawsuit out?" And he was pushing Marshall to change his lawsuit and, you know, violating every judicial ethic in the book to do so. And he had this idea. Waring had become obsessed with Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court decision that was the basis for all Jim Crow laws. And he had become obsessed with this, was writing about it all the time, said, "We've got to overturn that, that's the problem." And so he told Marshall, "I want you to challenge the constitutionality of that." And Marshall, smart lawyer, smarter lawyer than the judge probably, said, "Yeah, that's not going to work because that's a loser." And what happened is if you challenge the constitutionality of a state law, that case is not heard by one judge, it's heard by a panel of 3 judges. And Marshall knew that was a waste, and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund was about tapped out. He said, "Why do I need to do this?" And Waring said, "Yeah, you're going to lose 2-1. I'm going to be on your side, and the other 2 judges are going to go against you." He said, "But did you know that since 1937, there's this new rule? Any case heard by a panel of 3 federal judges is automatically appealed to the United States Supreme Court." And the Supreme Court had been trying to duck this for a long time. And Waring found a way to put it on their desk where they could no longer ignore it.
Now, in your book, you write poignantly about his relationship not only with Thurgood Marshall, but a lot of black folks in Charleston, like Septon McGee Clark, Ruby Cornwell, and others. And he and his wife Elizabeth would go over to their house and they would dine, something that is totally was not a social norm in Charleston at that time. But there's a flip side to that coin too. Not everybody in the Charleston black community liked what he was doing to shake up the status quo in South Carolina.
That's true. He didn't hear as much of the grief as Septon Clark did, and Ruby Cornwell, and some of his friends. They feared the judge was just stirring up animosity, going to make white people more, disagreeable toward them. And he didn't like the way that, some of them didn't like the way that was going. And even after a while, After the judge opened the primary, in that case, basically he said that the Democratic Party was not a private organization and they could not exclude African Americans from voting. That's when everybody, they were burning crosses in his house and sending him hate mail and all that stuff. And this just, Waring and his wife reacted. You know how it is, one side goes too far and the other side goes too far in reaction. Does that sound anything familiar?
No, not at all.
So, as Waring and his wife got more strident, even their friends, even Septima Clark said, "You're going too far. You've got to be careful." And thought that sometimes they were fighting for the right cause, but trying their best to stick it in everybody's eye too while they were doing it.
Who's the timekeeper for this? We got 5 minutes. Thank you. In the 5 minutes we have remaining, let's talk about his background and his relationship with black people and whether or not that early exposure to people of African descent may in some way may have opened him up to independent thought. His nanny, Hannah, was an enslaved woman who had worked for his family, and she became his nanny. He didn't know his last name. He just called her Da. And when reading your book, you get a sense that the Waring family had this rather paternalistic attitude towards black people in Charleston. Was that something to be ashamed of, or was something that they celebrated, or how should one now in the 21st century look back on that relationship with black people that they had enslaved who later became their domestic workers?
That's a very good question. I don't know how to answer it, but I think that they probably thought they were fairly progressive for their time. And if they thought about it at all, I say that there were a lot of relationships like this in Charleston. A lot of families that owned slaves after the war, after emancipation, during Reconstruction, those same people were still serving them. They were just paid employees who went home at night. And they had these very odd relationships. I think I put in the book that Hannah's husband didn't really work for the family. He was a longshoreman. But, every now and then he'd go out carousing and he'd get arrested because, that's what the police were originally set up to do, or police the black community. And so Hannah's husband, I think his name was James, he'd get arrested every couple of months. And the Waring family, despite coming over on one of the first boats, were not a wealthy family, but Waring's dad would always go bail James out of jail, just like he was, family. But it's a very odd relationship. But there were a lot of relationships like that.
Yeah, last question. After so much hostility directed towards him and his wife, they decided to leave Charleston. They went to New York, and they stayed in New York for 3 years. They came back to Charleston in November 1954, November 6th. I remember the date specifically because that was the day before my birthday. I turned 4 that year. And I was a student at Butte Elementary School in that auditorium where I had my lunches. 3 years later, 4 years later, the black community threw a big dinner for him and welcomed him back. And that was pretty extraordinary in the sense that this was a very segregated town at the time. And for that to happen seemed like, it just was unthinkable for something like that to happen then. And he had such a powerful influence on people that they really, really wanted to show their gratitude and thank him for what he had done. Of course, schools in Charleston did not, in South Carolina, particularly in Charleston, weren't desegregated until sometime later, but the groundwork had already been laid.
Yeah, that was the last time Waring came to Charleston. And it's funny, you can talk to people who were around just after that, and in the white community, no one talked about Judge Waring. He was just, Tom Tisdale, local attorney, he said one time that in the 50s, his mother or his aunt, or his grandmother told him, "We're related to Judge Waring, but you don't have to tell anyone that." The black community, conversely, loved him and remembered him and kept his name alive when there was this whole blackout on that.
Yeah, well, you know, as you know, his nephew, Thomas Waring, later became editor of the then News and Courier and wrote many, many editorials advocating the virtues of segregation, which was a stark contrast, you know, from the judge's position.
Yeah, it was, and you will hear people argue that in Charleston today, that the real reason the judge was shunned and kicked out of every club in town and his church and everything else was that people were mad at him about the way he left his first wife. And it was true, he was not perfect in his private life and was a bit of a cad. That thing didn't work out, and that his friends and family were upset about that. But I always say, yeah, but they weren't burning crosses in his yard because he got a divorce.
Okay, thank you all for that.
With Otto German, Dr. Andrew Lewis, Mrs. Hooker, and former Mayor Gerald Black. Moderated by Dr. Bernard Powers. Please come slide.
Well, good evening, and thank you all for being here with us tonight. Our panel is entitled Breaking the Color Barrier. Breaking the Color Barrier. And we have a distinguished group of people that have different yet overlapping relationships with the College of Charleston and this time period between 1954 and 1971. And so we're going to talk about their differing yet overlapping relationships with the college, their experiences, and I want, as we prepare to get into our subject, I want the panelists to think about this question along with the other things that you have on your mind. And it's this. What is it about your experience? What is it about your experience that propelled you and prepared you to be a change agent in the way in which you all became change? What prepared you? What propelled you to really break this color barrier in the way that you did? And so, why don't we go ahead and begin? And Mayor Riley, I know that you had a great relationship with President Stern. And so if you would talk to us about that relationship and the kinds of initiatives that President Stern took here at the college. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Powers and Dr. Shute. And ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be with all of you today. I seldom bring a written note set when I'm giving a speech, but seldom am I instructed to speak for 5 minutes only. So let me just talk for these few minutes about Ted Stern. He was the most amazing person I've ever known. He was he was liberal-minded in the pure sense of the word. He was open to new ideas and to discarding failed practices and mores. And he was committed to addressing the challenge of his time and our time, the challenge of racial progress. That people of color have the same opportunities as everyone else to advance in society and in the community. He was offered the job of president of the, let me turn around so I see y'all. Offered the job of president of the College of Charleston. The board members visited him at his office and said we would like you to be president of the College of Charleston, which was a great honor. And he said, I only have one question. This is 1916. I only have one question. College of Charleston then was segregated and was still a private school. He said, will you admit black students? If you don't, I will not be president of the College of Charleston. He said that they would, and they did. And what Tad Stern did was not only usher in the integration of the College of Charleston, but he made sure that every African-American student who came was personally greeted and coached by him. They became part of his family, and their families became part of them. And then he moved to bring people of color into important positions in the College of Charleston, the faculty and staff, setting a standard and making a mark. And what Tad Stern did in this process was become a great community leader to advance the cause of racial progress in the city of Charleston, which was greatly needed. His tenure at the College of Charleston was beyond extraordinary. And when he left, he then kept working in the community in important issues and was a great assist to me as mayor in many ways. And our work on the creation of the International African American Museum was a great interest to Tad because that was in furtherance of his ideas and his philosophy. And Tad never quit working and never quit serving and never quit helping people. And I visited him after his 100th birthday, and he died 2 days later. He wasn't bedridden, he was sitting in his home at Bishop Gadsden, and but we talked about one of his most recent initiatives was making sure that Bishop Gadsden was an integrated residential community. So he raised the money, I was happy to help him, to have Philip Simmons be the first African-American president at Bishop Gadsden. And when Mr. Simmons passed away, he did the same thing, raising money so that Ruby Cornwell, who we just heard about, would become a member of the Bishop Gadsden community. Tad Stern never quit his commitment to equal opportunity and racial progress never ebbed. And I think in this important celebration that the college is observing, I think of Tad when he was 100 years old, with fervor and commitment to advancing racial progress, and that in this College of Charleston's 250th anniversary, under the leadership of the great President Dr. Shue, and with your support, I believe that the College of Charleston will continue the legacy of Tad Stern in advancing the cause of racial progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mrs. Whipper, you've had an illustrious career which has touched on many areas of significance, And you have a connection to the College of Charleston that goes back even before you were an employee here. So would you just talk to us about your connection to the College of Charleston from when it started, kind of unofficially, as a young person, as a student, and then subsequently as an employee here, as an administrator here? Because that's a very interesting connection that you have, and we want people to know about that connection from the very beginning, going back to the 1940s. No, that, I know about it from the 1940s. No, it actually may go back a little further than that, so, thank you.
It's difficult to say when things like that happen. Because as a human being, a child of God, you never accept there's a difference. And you are encouraged to say, wherever you are, you try to make a difference. So it just becomes, sort of a part of you, part of your blood. But you know you are here for that purpose, to bring about equality. That it is just nothing that is accepted by anyone, that I'm different, I'm not equal. It's in your blood. It's good. So you try to find that place where you can help to make that difference. And I was influenced by Cornwell when she was the wife of a dentist, and with her white gloves on, she attempted to break into Fort Sumter Hotel on the Battery. And she was really dressed to T, white gloves and everything, and she was arrested. And I fell under her influence. And so that I was just around people that encouraged me to make a difference.
And you got some of that reinforcement and encouragement at Avery, is that right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And it is because you are influenced by people around you. That is why, as adults, we should live in such a way that we impress younger people to participate and not accept things, and try to find out where you can make a dent, where you can do a push.
And so, actually, I guess it was during World War II, or perhaps immediately following, you were a member of a group of young people that made application to the College of Charleston. Wrote a letter expressing an interest in being admitted.
I'm not sure, I can't, get to those dates, but it was almost in your blood. You know there is a wrong, and where can you make a push, make an impact? And you have to believe in yourself that you can make a difference and not accept a wrong. So I was surrounded by people who did things like Ruby Cumberland and set my clock. So it's like something that's supposed to be done, then you have to make sure that you are a part of making it happen. What can you do to make changes?
Yes, yes, as opposed to putting the responsibility on other people to make change. You took up the mantle yourself. So when you came to the college, you were an administrator here, and you were involved in what, at least today, we refer to as affirmative action and inclusion kinds of efforts. Could you just talk a little bit about what you were doing here as an administrator here at the College of Charleston and trying to improve the situation?
Well, fortunately, I came when Stern was president. And actually, affirmative action was a part of military. That's when it first happened in the military. And so it made it easy because he was used to it, he was accustomed to it, and it was easy to get the college to move in that direction.
Okay. So that military background that President Stern had, that naval background, that experience, and coming out of World War II and the integration of the armed forces, he was able to apply that model here, and that's really what led to him employing you and putting you in that position.
Yes, true.
Okay. And were you able to make headway? Did you have successes? Were there points of opposition that you
Oh, there's always But when you have support from the top,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
push it away.
Yes. And that is what we say, right? The change begins at the top. If you have someone, a forceful individual behind you, then you can take important initiatives and make things happen. So very, very, very important. Finally, let me ask you about this. And I learned something about you, and I've known you for some decades now, but I learned something about you. I learned something about you in the past couple of days that I didn't realize. If you just talk to us a little about your role in bringing Avery, linking Avery to the college. Talk about that in the 1980s, because that's one of the crowning jewels of the library and of the college, and you were really one of the inspirations behind that initiative. You and a group of community individuals who were involved in establishing the Avery Institute had an interest in encouraging the college to secure the building. But you were also part of a women's group that played an important role in that effort too. At least that's my understanding.
Well, as a child, family always participated in racial activities. She came to me and said, you know, they're going to take that building, Avery building, and they're gonna change it into a condo. And she said to me, you gotta do something about it. I said, why me? So she said that, well, you understand what's going on, and it's up to you. I said, well, I just president of my sorority, and she said, sorority. And with that push from her, when she discovered what they were going to do with that building, that's how it really started.
And this is what I found out in the past few days. I didn't know this. And I've known about your deep commitment to racial justice and women's issues. But my understanding now is that once you decided to take up this cause and this matter, you felt that you needed to devote all of your energy to it. And that led you to step down from your position, your official position here at the college, to work full-time, to help to further establish the Avery Institute, and then to get the college to secure that building and begin to think about really establishing programs there. Is that right?
Yeah, you're correct. You know,
Well, that's,
it's static. You keep moving.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there are always opportunities to make changes, to reach out. You don't sit comfortably behind a desk.
Sure. Well, that's quite a story, and that's quite a commitment, and we certainly applaud you for it, because Avery continues to be a bright and shining element here at the College of Charleston. Well, let's go to Otto. Otto, let's talk about your experience here as a student, as an athlete, and subsequently, really, and until very recently, as an administrator here at the college. So your experience it's quite broad. So you just talk to us a bit about that.
You know, I used to tell people I was married to the college longer than I was married to my wife. But my story is a little bit different than the norm. Going back to the question that you asked, you know, what empowered me to be a person to try to bring about change. But before I say that, I'll tell you what it is. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my roommate, Mr. Leroy Ellis. He's in the house. Now, when people don't know Leroy is a part of the history of the College of Charleston as being the first black tennis player. And he was also my first year. But my journey with racism and everything started a long time ago. And I was really, really prepared to come to the College of Charleston. In 1965, I made a decision as a young 14-year-old to leave the predominantly black high school to go to the predominantly white high school. And it was 7 blacks among 1,500 white kids. And it was a tough road, tough journey. My life at Moultrie High didn't change until such time that I was engaged in athletics. And it shows you the power of athletics and how it can bring people together from different backgrounds, social, economic backgrounds, and races, and bring people together. But coming to the College of Charleston, I was prepared to deal with the racism that may confront me when I got here. People don't realize that in 1969, College of Charleston total enrollment was only about 445 students. But it was still a situation that there were some people that did not want us here. The bottom line is I give credit, tremendous credit to Dr. Stern and Fred Daniels, who was the dean of admissions and the head basketball coach. If you want to talk about courage, those were men of courage. And they did a lot for the College of Charleston and integrated the College of Charleston. And I have been, with being scrutinized, going back to my high school days, simply because of that decision that I made, I'm being scrutinized by both whites and blacks. Because I was looked at as an intruder among my white brothers and sisters, and I was looked at as a traitor among my black brothers and sisters in my own neighborhood. And one of the reasons why I chose to go to Moultrie is this. Moultrie was 3 blocks from where I lived. Lang was 6 miles, and I had to be bused there. And so when I made that decision, I had to walk past my black schoolmates to go to Moultrie, as you're subject to the rhetoric. Or, you think he's a white boy, he's better than us. Been there, done that, heard that. And I've been telling this story. I celebrated my 50th high school reunion last February. And something just touched me to email all my classmates, because there was so much love and joy in the room at that time. And my question was, where was that love 50 years ago? The point ought to be that what they did not understand is we were all going through the same thing. The fact of the matter is, at Moultrie, it was 7 of us and 1,500 of you. And like I said, not until such time that I started playing sports did my life change. So be prepared to come to the College of Charleston and give that experience to my time at Moultrie High. I had 4 years to get ready. Now, coming to the College of Charleston, why did I come? I wanted to be a part of change. I wanted to accept the academic challenge that I know it was going to produce for me. And I wanted to maintain my status as an athlete in the local area. But prior to that, I really wanted to go to an HBC. And after I played a basketball game for the Lower State Championship, we went to visit South Carolina State. And I was told I could get in, but I was told I can't play basketball. I can't play basketball. And at that point in my career, when I graduated high school, I was an honorable mention, All-American. I was the 3rd leading scorer in the state of South Carolina. And I was the Low Country Player of the Year. And I can't play basketball. So I went back home to my mother, who only had a 7th grade education. When she said to me, son, go where you are wanted. And the College of Charleston wanted me. Because Fred Daniels was recruiting me for 2 years. Fred Daniels broke bread at my table. And what I got from my experience at the College of Charleston and Moultrie High School, it taught me how to not treat people. I don't see color. I see people. That's what my mother taught me. As an administrator, I've worked for 8 different presidents. I've worked in many, many different departments. And I felt at some point in time where I was overlooked for promotions moving forward in my career. But my last 27 years here, I'm retired now. I spent in compliance in the athletics department. And you see the good, the bad, and the ugly across the board. And I think every one of us in here has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I have to make reference to last Sunday in church. We had a Caucasian minister. And he said to us as a congregation, God intended for all of us to live and love one another as one. And that touched my heart. And I think that's what we all need to do.
So Andy, you have been on faculty here and in administrative positions since 1974. That's so striking to me because I came to Charleston as a graduate student in 1975. So I have a sense of what Charleston was like then. Just talk to us about your experience here and the challenges and the rewards.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start somewhere like where Otto started, and that is with my parents and my grandparents. My grandmother went through second grade, my grandfather went through third grade. My mother and my father both finished high school and owned their own business. But I guess part of what challenged me to be where I am and what I am is our parents taught us never to hate, because the motto that they believed was, if you hate, it hurts you more than it hurts the other person. So I always looked at persons as the individual that I'm dealing with. And I say to people, even as I've said to someone just a week or so ago, I don't find any ill will against you until you give me reason to. So that's been kind of my motto in life. And I've worked at this institution under 8 presidents. And President Chu, the most recent, I worked with President Stern, and President Stern hired me. And when I came in, and I told someone this story, when I came in as a faculty member, at that time, the president interviewed everyone, every faculty member. It wasn't just the department. He interviewed every faculty member that came in. You went to his office. And I had done my homework before I came for the interview, and we started having a conversation, and he said, well, Andy, I see that you're a water safety instructor. And for those of you who know anything about that, that's the highest level you can get in instructor trainer for swimming. And I say, yes, President Stern, I see that you are a past Olympic swimmer. For those of you who didn't know, he was on the 1936 Olympic team as an alternate. And immediately we struck up a conversation talking about aquatics and other things and what have you. He didn't tell me I was hired that day, but he did tell me we had a good interview. So I went back, and a few days later, I got the conversation. I got the call, and we had a brief conversation with the then chair, Roy Hills of the department. At the time, it was called Physical Education and Health. It's now the Department of Health and Human Performance. And I was hired. Well, when I came to the College of Charleston, I was 24 years old. And here's one of the startling stories about being a faculty member. I was teaching one of my classes in the fall semester, and there was a white, older lady sitting in the back of the room. And she said to me, young man, what do you think you can teach me? My response to her was, if you just stick with me, we will see at the end of the semester. And I think she was waiting for me to give some type of negative response, but we became best friends. And I kind of took that from Mr. Hunt and Ms. Grant, who were the first 2 African-American faculty members to come to this institution. I had 3 mentors when I first came. The year that I came in 1974, 3 faculty members of color were hired. My 3 mentors were Ms. Grant, Mr. Hunt, and Ms. Whipper. Spent a lot of time in their office, hearing, talking, sometimes crying, because racism was not as overt as it was covert at that time. And a lot of things would happen to you that you would have to deal with in your own way. And to this day, one factor of being a faculty member that sticks with me and drives the knife very, very deep is I had been on campus in the fall semester, and a faculty member at that time came up to me and said, "Why are you here? Who hired you? Who made the mistake of allowing you to be a faculty member at the College of Charleston?" That person and I passed constantly, going back and forth on the campus. For 10 years, we never said another word to each other after that day. 10 years later, he and I had a conversation. I was in, ready to be tenured, and he said, "You deserve to be here." But again, it wasn't because I responded negatively when he said that to me. I didn't respond at all. But dealing with a lot of those types of situations as a faculty member, and you have to put it in perspective. Otto said that the number he gave was 400 and something. When I came in 74, the college had about 3,000 students. About, I'd say, maybe around 75 or 80 faculty members. Of that 75 or 80, there were 5 of us of color. The year that I came, as I said, in 74, 3 persons came in. 2 of us stuck it out. 1 stuck it out for a couple of years and left. Another stuck it out for about 4 years and left. I guess I'm the only one that stuck it out and kept coming back. Now, the reason I kept coming back, I don't know, but I love the place. I love the College of Charleston. But I will say to you and say that you never know who you are impressing. I was a faculty member, and I had a lot of students come before me and in my classes and interactions. But I shared this story with someone. I was never more proud than when individuals of the physical plant, the grounds crew, would come to me and say, "Thank you for sticking it out and making a difference." They saw that as moving forward or making some change at the College of Charleston. I wasn't demeaning in any way to what they were doing because I saw it as being just as important as what I was doing, but they saw me in a different light. And for each of us sitting here on the stage, we looked at the College of Charleston through different lenses. And my lens as a faculty member allowed me to see a lot of different things that maybe someone in the grounds crew had not seen. Or maybe what Ms. Whipper, who was living in Randolph Hall, was not dealing with. Or Otto in athletics not dealing with. Bernie never knew this. I never said this to Bernie, but when Bernie came for an interview, an administrator said to me one day on the sidewalk, "We've got a great opportunity to hire this person, but I think he wants too much money." My comment was, hire him. If you think he's great, it's not the money that's going to matter. Hire him. Well, Bernie was hired, so that's a long story. But that was one way I think you would be asked questions or you would be put in situations that there were times I had to say, I do not represent every black person on this campus. Don't look at me in that light. But I represent change that can occur in a positive way. I was very pleased with working with President Stern. I will say there are some presidents that I have worked under that I was not as pleased with, and will say that publicly. I will say I have been very impressed, President Hsu, with what you have done since joining us, and hopefully many of those things that you're putting into place will continue. But I will also say, while the college has come a long ways, celebrated 250 years, it still has a long, long ways to go. Our diversity in the students, our diversity in the faculty, our diversity in administrative roles still needs some work. I've retired 2 times, 3 times, Paul. This is the 3rd time, and I see the sign in the back saying, thank you, or thank you all.
Thank you so very much, panel. We appreciate all your experiences and sharing them with us. Let's give them another.
Again, thank you to Mia Rowley, Ms. Whipper, Mr. German, and Dr. Lewis for your candid conversations. Let's give them another round. Our 3rd session is 1971 to the present. We have a drum roll, charting a new course with President Chu and Dr. Harris, moderated by Octavia Mitchell.
Good evening, everyone. Wasn't that a wonderful conversation? You could listen to them all day, right? Wow, thank you so much. I don't know about you, when we witnessed the lighting ceremony, did anybody else get emotional? That was a very special moment. The warrior of the light, the keeper of the light. Very special. And Dr. Lewis, I don't know if you remember me, but you taught me how to swim. I was one of your students in Upward Bound. And to this day, I'm a great diver. All right, everybody. So, we've talked about laying the foundation for change. We've talked about breaking the color barrier. Now we're charting a new course. We're talking about now, we're talking about the future. And I am so honored to be sharing the stage this afternoon with the leader of your great college, your wonderful college, President Andrew Shue. And of course, Dr. Renard Harris. So we're going to begin. We're just going to have a conversation this evening. We just talked about the struggle to desegregate CFC.
Right.
And we know that CFC was desegregated in 1968. Right now, what is the current state of diversity here?
Sure. So I think the current state is not a singular but a plural. It's on a continuum. When you look at the data, roughly 19+% underrepresented minority, African American, Latin American, Native American, Asian American. You look at faculty, African American faculty, 4 or 5%. We just recently did a survey that was like a campus climate survey. And in terms of diversity, in short, it really says that if you're a Cougar at the College of Charleston, regardless of your identity, you're embraced. But we don't commit to that identity. So we need to go further, other than saying you're Cougar. Are you a black Cougar? Are you an Asian Cougar? What more can you do? So we need to work on that space, but we are very accepting regardless. So that's one side of the continuum. On the other side of the continuum, though, is this crazy dynamic we have right now. President Andrew Shue has just brought a lot of positive energy to the campus. And it's really interesting that one human being kind of has unleashed creativity. Just a couple of days ago, we had our Founders Day, and the energy was just positive. But that's in energy. There's so many initiatives happening right now, I can barely keep up. We were talking about initiatives where every school will have an opportunity to support its academically struggling students, which many of our students, underrepresented minorities, fall in that space, where every school will do more than just say, let me see your program study, you have an A, B, C, D, or F, that we are motivating, we are creating relationships. And so it's intentional. It's not just you have an advisor, it's pointed that, you know what, things aren't going well right now, what can we do? So I guess in short, what diversity looks like on a continuum from one side to the other is that we are more personalizing diversity. We are saying, I don't just see you, Bernard, as a cougar, but you're an African-American male cougar, and how do you fit in this space? And so there are multiple initiatives going on campus, but because of that, the personalization says that we not only want you as a head count, because diversity is much more than a head count, it's how do you include, how do you fit, are you at home here? And it's not just lip service anymore, it's operationalizing it, it's initiatives, they're goal setting. So that's where it is in the continuum. So in terms of this current state, on one side of the continuum, it's data that says, don't rest in your complacency. On the other side, it's dynamic energy right now, and how do we keep that energy moving?
Now, President Hsu, in higher education, what should diversity look like?
So, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yes. So I don't think there's one look that all higher education institutions should look like. But I think a reasonable expectation is that as a public institution, we, as the College of Charleston, should look more like our community in the Charleston area, but also in the state. So, Renard just gave you the statistics of our diversity on campus. We have only 8% African American students. But in the state, we all know we have about 27% African American in the state. So certainly it would be a reasonable goal. It should be our goal to reach that. But I understand that's a very difficult task, but that's certainly what we should be aspiring for.
And Dr. Hsu, you had limitations in your childhood growing up in China. Can you share a little bit about growing up in China and about how that has informed your approach to education?
Sure. So, growing up in China during a chaotic time where schools are constantly interrupted, I did not have a good K-12 education. But certainly compared to the experience of black people in this country, I don't think it's comparable. People in this country certainly went through slavery, segregation, and so forth. But my experience as a child with my secondary education constantly interrupted gave me the unique perspective of how to help students who did not have the opportunity to have a good secondary education. So that's perhaps, the other day I was interviewing with, I think it was Channel 2, and they asked me, what's your unique perspective and where you can contribute? And I said, where I can contribute the most is perhaps as an educator. I know what it's like to be struggling in college without a good secondary education. And I have the passion to help those students. So I hope the College of Charleston will become that place where students who aren't as fortunate could come here and get a first-rate college education.
Now, Dr. Harris, you grew up in Mississippi.
I did, yeah.
So what in your experience growing up there drives your passion for access and inclusion today?
Right, so first 12 years, I was in Tougaloo, as a historically black college, and back in the woods, behind Tougaloo was a small farming community. And so, a lot of black farmers, plows, crops, and old folks and young folks in the field, and we later moved down to Pascagoula, Mississippi, down the Gulf of Mexico. So living in the rural part, it was a lot like what just happened here. a lot of people sharing wisdom and knowledge that you almost need to take notes about it. One of the things I learned was about self-identity and value, that I have to value myself, right? It's because when I leave the farm, when I go outside, that I will hear a lot of things that may not value me as much. And because of that, I need to take in what I need to hear and discard what I don't. So I think value is huge for me. Of course, when I moved down to Pascagoula and seeing all my cool uncles and, learning my swagger, my black move, who am I as a black brother? Like, oh, I get it, right? So going to the black barbershop and shaping myself. So in the country part, it's about all these beautiful adages. Hold your head high if you die hard. Don't carry the ignorant stick. You got all this cool southern country coming at you about creating value for yourself. And then, of course, in Pascagoula, all my cool hip uncles who crab, and this is how you crab, this is how you fish, and this is how you be cool. So that idea for me is for every student that comes into the school, that when you walk in here, you walk in as a black man or black woman. When you walk out as a black man or black woman with an amazing degree. Not the opposite. When you walk in, oh, black man, we need to change everything about you, and we will give you a degree. That's two different things, right? And so the idea that we don't need to change you, because I think what happens when we miss is that when you walk in as a black man or a Latin man or Asian man or just however you identify, when we say, that's wrong, what we're doing is insulting everything that came before me, right? You say, you're not a strong black, you don't be this man. That insults my mama. You want to talk about a black man's mama? I mean, don't do that. So it's amazing how everything you're telling me I'm not insults everything that shaped me. And so it's just a poor approach for me that let me be this. I am full, I am whole, I am beautiful. And now I'm at the college. So when I walk across that stage, across the cistern, you cloak me with whatever major it is. But you cloak me as a black man, and now with even more value because I have a degree from the College of Charleston. So what I want to bring to the table is that when those kids walk through that Porter's Lodge, white, black, or otherwise, you're full and you're beautiful. That's fantastic. Now, let us shape around you. Let's not shape you around it. Because jokingly, and my mother has a great sense of humor. My major was my doctorate was in teacher education. I was in a class in classroom management. They would tell us about 1, 2, 3, time out, and all these management skills. So I jokingly called my mother. I said, Mom, guess what? I just left class and you did it all wrong. You didn't put me in time out and send me to my room. And excuse my language, my mother said, you and the professors go to hell. Because you raise your child the way you raise your child. You don't deconstruct a human being to make them. And I want to close with this. Mr. Kenyatta Grimmage, who's an Access Initiative, often has panels where he has young students come and try to encourage them to come to college. And they asked for some closing words in this panel. I was in the panel with Mr. Arnold German and some other folks. And the young man asked for some closing advice. And I said, there'll be a lot coming at you, but I listen to the people I value. And so the panel discussion ended, and we stood up. Mr. German grabs me by my arm and pulls me to the side. He says, you value me, don't you? And I'm still not too sure if it was a statement or a question. But the idea is that when those students walk in, we value what they walk in with. And then we cloak them with this amazing education. And when they walk across that stage, they are better as who they were when they came in, but with the College of Charleston degree with them.
That was there. Students,
That's right.
the other way around.
That's exactly right.
What is your vision for diversity at the College of Charleston, President Shue?
So my vision for diversity, of course, there are 3 things I would like for us to do well. I already mentioned that we're not doing very well in terms of the percentage of students that of color, and we need to do a much better job in recruitment. But just to have them here is not enough for their success. Just as Bernard just mentioned, we need to be able to accept the way they are and provide them with a valuable education. And so we need to do a better job in supporting our minority students and make sure that they are successful. They can be retained and they can graduate in 4 years. And the third thing that I think we need to do well is to create a inclusive culture. So diversity without an inclusive culture is not necessarily a healthy place. For example, we recently had students, minority students, felt that they were experiencing microaggression, or they heard racial slurs in the classroom from their instructor. You know, whatever the intention of the person who were saying those things, or whether the person who did something think that he or she was the behavior is microaggression. It doesn't matter. Our minority students feel that way. And that means that our faculty, our staff, are not sensitive enough. And if they are not sensitive enough, then that means we have not built an inclusive culture that make our students feel comfortable here. So of the three things, I feel that the last one perhaps is the most important. I'll give you an example how things could help change the perspective of one group. We have this Marty's Place for Jewish students. They serve kosher food there. And as a result, our Jewish students feel very much at home at the College of Charleston. We need to do that same for our other minority groups, whether it's African American or Hispanic. We need to do things so that they feel comfortable and they feel at home here and they feel welcome here. And that's where we need a lot of work. We need a lot of education of our faculty and staff so that we provide that welcome environment to our minority students.
No, I agree 100% that in the classroom, diversity is going to come one of three ways. It should come all three. The content you choose, how you deliver the content, and your relationship with every student out there. And so it's not just one thing, it's multiple. What did you choose? What content did you choose? How are you moving that from you to the human being? And how are you relating to that human being in front of you? And this inclusiveness, where this fit is important, not just here. And the great example of the Jewish studies area, that all of our students need to feel, you know, I have a good, safe place, and this is my home. That's incredibly important.
Now, you talked about your vision, but what does that actually look like in practice? You talked about improving recruitment efforts. What are you doing to do that?
So,
What that looks like is, well, we first have to put it in the strategic plan. And we're in a one-year process of developing a strategic plan. And diversity and inclusion has become a major theme in that process. And we all, as a campus, I think everybody recognize the importance of diversity and inclusion. As far as how we implement those, there are many things that we need to look at, right? So recruitment, you asked, what are we doing in terms of recruitment? My predecessor implemented something called the top 10% admission rule, where we could admit students from any high school who are in the top 10% of their class, regardless of their SAT or even GPA, right? So and I think that would help us recruit certainly more minority students who come from the rural areas where secondary education is not the best. But our past experience also shows that just to recruit more students or just to tell them that the College of Charleston is a welcoming place and you should come here to study is not good enough. Oftentimes we have to overcome the economic hurdle that many minority students faces. So this fall is the first time we're going to offer a lot of need-based scholarships, particularly to, for us to recruit more minority students. And then, of course, for our success, student success, Dr. Harris and I talked about this quite a bit. We not only are going to implement student success initiatives across the board to all of our students, but I have instructed Dr. Harris to particularly study what we need to do in order to ensure that our minority students are successful.
Great first steps, right? So we're charting a new course. We're moving forward. What is your charge to everyone here? How can we all help in improving diversity and inclusion? We witnessed the passing of the light ceremony earlier, which we all enjoyed so much. What else can we do?
Well, I guess my charge to everyone is what Mrs. Whipple just mentioned. Wherever you are, try to make a difference. Participate. And if we all participate and try to make a difference, then we will make a difference.
I agree. I think, that panel, all panels that came up, I mean, success leaves clues. I mean, Mr. Brian Hicks talked about the complicated relationship. The second panel, I mean, that's a textbook. It was a textbook on how to. Because, and one of the themes that came from that is that you're not adversaries, you just see things differently. In order to move it, you don't have to destroy each other. You just have to find that common place. And I love the word, as Shuda shared, implement. So diversity is one of our core values, but sometimes, it can be a value you kind of get lost in your way. But implement is different than a value as it floats above your head. Implement is where's the action behind it. And so when he uses words like implement and scholarship and initiative, that's putting us in the doing. And so here's the tricky part. In the doing can be muddy, right? And so if you think about that last panel said, it's going to be a lot of friction here, but we know what's on the other side of this. And that's some amazing things. So we can get that implementation, that action, we can understand and take clues from that last panel that it's going to get muddy, but it's not about the individual, it's about the goal to make this school a better place. That's a good plan. That's a good plan.
Powerful words, not just words, but actions to keep the momentum moving forward. That's what we want, right? All right. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, President Hsu and Dr. Harris.
Thank you to all for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to the Office of Institutional Diversity for such a powerful event. And thank you to all of our panelists and moderators. Please let's give them another round. Just a few reminders, please complete the surveys. The Office of Institutional Diversity needs your feedback. There are 6 books for sale, 4 of them. One is on Ted Stern, one on Weir Charleston, one is on our Mayor, Joe Riley, and the 4th is In the Darkest, South Carolina. And 2 books are on the College of Charleston. One is from 1770 to 1935. The other is a book written by Nan Morrison, A History of the College of Charleston from 1936 to 2008. Imagine, okay, Herb Frazier, Brian Hicks, Dr. Powers. I would like 10%. Since it was my idea. Imagine the story that will be told in the book that will be written about the College of Charleston history from 2008 to the future. History made here under the leadership of Dr. Shute is going to be a powerful book. Okay, 10%. Well, as we leave this afternoon, one more reminder. There's a reception following, and there will be other history makers and trailblazers. They will have white ribbons on, so please seek them out. As we leave this afternoon, please remember 2 quotes. One on change and the other on faith. Change, those of you will probably remember this quote from one of our presidents of the United States. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. The other quote on faith is, dare to take the journey that begins where the path ends. So, to our warriors of the light, thank you for passing your light to our keepers of the light. Again, thank you all for joining us. And at this time, this concludes our program. And please join us for reception. Again, thank you.